Café and Networking Podcast promotes successful business experts. I'm Tom Reaoch, known as the King of Networking, connecting people throughout the world from my studio in Brazil. And today we talk with Jan Cavelle, and she's an ex-entrepreneur, writer on startups and scale-ups. She's author of the book Scale for Success, Expert Insights into Growing Your Business. She's joining us from Hastings in the United Kingdom. So Jan, is mental health a factor to consider in entrepreneurship?
Very, very definitely, Tom. I think it's something which simply isn't talked about enough, and I'm very passionate about bringing it to the forefront wherever I can. I think entrepreneurs are expected and expect themselves to be very, very strong people. It goes with the package. They look after others. They push on. They do extraordinary things.
Right.
But, where in that is the space for their mental health?
And how do you address and how do you realize where you are on that page?
I think we can do so much by talking about it. I mean, considering how much the picture of entrepreneurship has changed, of entrepreneurship has also changed, but of mental health in general has changed over the last 5 years. We're all talking about it. It's okay to talk about it. I think possibly entrepreneurs are the last bastion of that. And if we can break that down and say, yeah, they're human too, then
it is, and
not be such a
very
problem.
well so. And when we're talking about startups, I mentioned before we came on, I was at an event a couple days ago here in Campinas. I was amazed at companies, their focus today is on wellness.
Yes.
So it's become a category. They take that and lump it together. And that really englobes, some people don't want to say mental illness or mental health.
Let's
talk about wellness.
Mental health challenges, isn't it?
So it's how you say the same thing. An apple's an apple. But it can go into a number of different recipes, right?
It can indeed, yeah. I mean, we've got all the sort of low-key ones from, a touch of ADHD or, being a little bit obsessive, which, let's face it, a lot of entrepreneurs are a tiny bit obsessive without being very rude to them. And I was one, and I was extremely obsessive. But it does sort of go with the territory. But when we are obsessive, it can also bring problems in itself.
Well, being obsessive partly, I think, is one of the characteristics. And I take that back to myself. Because when we have an idea, I had ideas and I thought they were great and I took them forward. The challenge was from all the other persons around me that said, that's never going to work. And then it's sort of, they're tickling the line. I said, well, I really think it will. Many times it did, other times it didn't. But the challenge comes from that. So if we don't accept and we don't focus on what our idea is, principally for startups, principally today in this day and age, right? Because you can have an idea, and we can see many opportunities out there. Because there are thousands of opportunities.
Absolutely, and more in some ways than there ever were. I think, as you were saying earlier too, the entrepreneurship sort of world changed so much during the pandemic. It was colossal shifts, which is actually why I've just written another book, because of just that change, rather like you've changed your podcast slightly, because the world has just moved really fast, which actually is good, but it's another mental health challenge.
Right.
Change is difficult to cope with, isn't it, for people?
What you write about, and you're talking of scale for success, because obviously the startup phase of getting your act together is one thing. And once you do, and you can feel partial success in what we have done or someone has done, the next step is more challenging, right? The scaling up.
I think it is, yeah. But I also think that a lot of entrepreneurs, again, myself included, thrive on that challenge and work themselves into the ground obsessively till they get to that point that they've set themselves. And at the top of that mountain, is where they come unstuck. It's what now? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
why am I not happy I've succeeded? But it is a curious sort of roller coaster of mental health that we go on. I always find it much harder during the successful times than I did in the challenges.
Well, and that success brings what I've seen a need to
Yeah,
have a team, to have others helping. Because to one point, we can do it by ourselves, or we think we can do it by ourselves. No,
yes,
it's not right or wrong. It's the way it is because it's only
mm,
yourself. Generally, we don't have
absolutely.
money to do anything else,
Mm,
right? But to scale up, then you need other resources, and that could be money, but generally it's people.
both, often. But yes, and you need the right people most of all, otherwise you will be with more problems. But the right team can be a lifesaver.
And in today's world, as a leader, let's say as a business owner wanting to scale up, then you get the next challenge. How can we, in the persons we're looking to become part of our team, how can we address wellness before we bring them on board?
Yeah, I think it's part of a culture thing, isn't it now, Tom? As you said, wellness has become mainstream altogether. And the way a company attracts people is always through what its culture is, what its values are. And I think any company now, any company needs to be heard that they really respect and value people's health and well-being. I think it's now going to be the only way they can get quality people.
Yeah, and that's really an englobing part of the word diversity.
Absolutely, absolutely. People have woken up and they want quality of life, not just a wage packet.
Now you're in the UK, and what are your feelings today? Let's say post-pandemic. I don't say we're in a new world, but we're in a different time. Are things better, looking better? What is your personal feeling as you sit there, and what's your outlook for business?
For UK on its own, I think we're in a very rough place.
Hmm.
Globally, I think it's all very uncertain. I mean, a large chunk of the world is, going into recession. I think
Right.
it's a third of the world they're quoting, isn't it? So there will be more challenges. But any entrepreneur who has gone through the pandemic and survived
Hmm.
and learned, or even if they've just learned and they're ready to go again, I think is set up to meet these things. It's much more challenging than it ever was, but that's what entrepreneurs do.
It's exactly that. That's what I say. I consider the challenges as a full plate.
Hmm.
When everything's well and everybody's in their comfort zone, fat and sassy and happy, there's no drive to do anything because you got a bunch of money in
Exactly.
the bank and everybody's smiling and you're out to dinner, but that's
Yeah.
not the real world.
No, it goes back to my point about, thriving on challenges. That's exactly what we do.
And that's what you write about. So,
It is, yeah, very much so. And in this next one, I do talk a bit more about mental health and fear, and which of course is paralyzing for entrepreneurs, often, and particularly in the early days, should I start? Should I do this? Oh, what happens if? That fatal thing of what if?
yeah,
Um,
well, yeah, the what if, but I get back to what I mentioned earlier. We're trying to convince. My life has been that way. More people try to convince me that it won't work,
yeah.
but you have to be a believer in yourself.
You do, or at least in your idea, even if you're a bit shaky on yourself, because you need to work on it.
Well, it gets back to what you said about the fear. And yesterday, I interviewed a person talking about fear and confidence.
Mm,
We need a little of each, uh,
yeah,
and we can't be overconfident either. So it's how we temper those things.
yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Tom. Wise words.
Very good. So how can our listeners find you, Jan?
You can find me at jancavelle.co.uk, Tom. I'm very easy to find, just .co.uk, all one word, Jan Cavelle.
And your book is on Amazon.
My Scale for Success has been out for a little while. It is on Amazon and various other bookshops. And Start for Success, which is the next sort of post-pandemic one, is will be available for pre-order within a couple of weeks.
Very good. We'll hope to be
So,
talking again in the future.
I look forward to that too.
Okay, thank you again.
Thank you, Tom.
And again, for our listeners, it's Jan Cavelle. It's Jan. The last name is Cavelle. Cavelle. And you'll find her at jancavelle.co.uk. And her book, as I mentioned, is on Amazon. Scale for Success, Expert Insights into Growing Your Business. Café and Networking is brought to us by Focus MI Market Intelligence, an agricultural market research specialist in Brazil. More information at their website, focusmi.com. Thanks for listening until the next time here at Café and Networking Podcast.